Hello crafty friends, Caroline here. In today's video I want to share 5 cards and a junk journal that I created with the Spellbinders Karten Kit Vintage Momentos. So let's get started with card number 1. For card number 1, I decided to make my own background. I'm using a piece of watercolor paper and I choose a stencil from my stash. And I am making sure this is gonna stay in place and tape it down with some low-tech tape. And then I'm choosing a range of distress colors, and I have also 2 extra colors here that came from another kit, and this is like a yellow and another brownish color. And I'm only using the inks in a circle around the edge, so I gonna have kind of a vignette around the page. And I'm starting out with some light brown like the tea dye, and then I'm adding a little bit of yellow, and then I'm adding also a little bit of green. But I want to give this background kind of like a vintage look, so I'm staying with the like a muted color palette. And then I'm adding a vintage photo around the edge, make it darker, so it gets darker from the outside to the inside, it gets lighter. And then I'm removing my stencil and adding an extra layer of vintage photo around the edge. Then I'm adding some water, and then I'm picking it up to get a more distress look, since the distress inks react with water. When this is dry, I'm going to use my stamp platform, and I'm choosing this stamp that had this cute bird on the twig. And I'm stamping this first with some tea dye color, distress ink. And then I'm using a little bit of water and spritz this on the stamp and picking up the excess water around it. And I'm stamping this onto my card here. And here is the effect that I get. It's kind of like a watercolor effect, almost like a watermark, if you will. And then when this is dry, I'm using my VersaFine in brown. That's the pine cone color, and I'm stamping it right on top. So I have almost like a little shadow, minimum shadow around my stamp, and here you can see that. I'm also stamping out my sentiment. It's the thinking of you from the stamp set. And I'm distressing the edges with the rest of the ink that's on my brushes. Then I'm getting my watercolors out, and I'm actually coloring my bird in watercolors. And I'm choosing really very light muted palette for this. I'm picking up the colors that are already on my palette. So I'm making the berries kind of like a purplish bluish color, and then just the twig, I'm making this in a like brown color. And of course my leaves gonna be green. And I'm using just a really minimum amount of pigment, and I'm using also a very fine brush for this. because I want this image to look almost like a faded, like a faded image, almost like a vintage image. And this is kind of like a little bluebird, and I'm just putting a little bit of yellowish color in the front of it. I'm using a lot of water just to spread my pigments around. And I'm giving him a little bit of shading just to the edge here. And here it's finished. Then I'm using a bigger brush and I'm just splatter some gold watercolor all around the image, and also some of this pearlescent. This will give some sparkles. And I'm just picking up the droplets that just fell on top of my picture here. And then I'm using a little bit of the Distress microglaze and just rub this on top of my image. This will protect it and also give some shine. Then I am adding my picture, and I cut this paper slightly smaller in width than a card base, since my stencil was a little bit smaller. And then I'm just placing it onto my card base. And I framed my little sentiment here on a piece of gold foil cardstock or mirror cardstock. And for some final sparkle, I'm adding some gold stickles and also some Gold Coast glitter drops. And here's my finished card. Card 2. So for my second card, I used a card base and I ripped the front half, and I also cut another piece of card base in two and used just one piece of it. And then I have this blue paper that I ripped in strips, and I have a bunch of those little border dies that I cut out, and also some die cuts. And on the die cuts I cut away the white outline. Now I'm gluing this other piece of card base behind the ripped piece, and I am making sure I'm just gluing very to the left, so I have space to put that other piece of pattern paper behind it. And then I should have done this before I glued it on, but I don't know, I forgot. So I'm just take a piece of paper and protect the rest of the card, and I am inking up the edge of this piece, and I'm using the Distress Ink Iced Spruce for this. Now here I'm doing the other piece as well. This will be attached on front, so it looks like a little fan that you have like one piece after another after another. Then I'm tucking in those little border dies that came in the die set, and I die cut this in kind of like a brownish perlmutt cardstock that I had in my stash. I think this color looks super nice with this kit, gives this vintage look. And I also cut 2 in white cardstock. And I'm just tucking this under the ribs where my paper edge is. Then I'm just cut away the excess. Now for my die cuts here, I'm using the Distress ink tea dye, and I distress the edge of all my die cuts. I don't want that white to be too obvious, so I'm just using the ink to mute this down. And I'm also doing this to the sentiment. Now I'm ready to assemble the top. So I have this little postcard here, which is going to be in the middle. And then I'm arranging my flowers around this, one on the top and then one on the bottom. And I'm using foam tape and I'm using liquid glue to attach everything in place. Then I'm using my key and I am trying to figuring out how I want this the best and decide to go right in the middle. And then I'm using the key and I glue this already onto my sentiment. And then I will attach the other piece with some foam tape on top. And then I'm adding this into the middle. I still have this little butterfly and I'm just trying to figure out where do I put it. And in the end I decided to go for the bottom left corner. And then I'm adding some final embellishment again with my gold stickers and with my Gold Coast glitter drops. And here is the finished card. Card 3. So for my third card I choose 2 pattern papers. I use one of the frames. I pulled the sequins and some die cuts, and I also cut out one of the frames. And I am attaching first a little piece of perlmutt vellum paper behind my frame. And then I'm adding the frame. This has you can pull it up and it's kind of a sticker. And I'm attaching this on top of this pattern paper that has the script on it. Cutting this out and I'm layering the other frame on top. And my peacock will be on top of this little frame. Now for my background, I'm using this pattern paper that has all the feathers on it, and I choose the feather stamp that came with the kit and adding it randomly onto the background with some embossing ink, and I will emboss this in gold. Then I'm using again my distress ink, the ice spruce, and this will give this paper a very nice vintage or vintage look. Then I'm attaching my background to my card base. And I cut this slightly smaller so I have a white frame around it. And then I'm attaching the peacock to the other peacock with some foam tape, and I will also distress the edge here with some tea dye, and then I'm layering both of the frames on top of each other, and I use this sticker, the shipboard sticker Shine, and I'm adding it to the bottom of the card. Then I decided to put some sequins on there, just a few, and also some gold stickles. And also some Euro drops in pink. And I also decided to move one of the sequins from the right to the left. And here is the finished card. Card 4. So for card number 4, I use this wooden textured background, and I glued this onto a piece of old sketchbook paper because I'm gonna do some alteration to this piece. First I added some distress ink, and then I'm adding some water, and I am picking the water up, give it an even more distressed look and make it a little darker. And then I'm drying this, and then I'm using again, I think this is walnut stain distress ink, and I'm using a little Prima stencil that I have in my stash. This has script on it, and I'm adding this to my piece. And then I'm using some Ranger opaque modeling paste, and I'm using the same stencil, and I'm adding this to my background. And then while the embossing paste is still wet, I'm adding a little bit of gold glitter to the embossing paste. Just wanted a little bit more sparkle on the side. And then I'm using the other pattern, another piece of pattern paper, and this is the paper that matches one of the cards, of the little memory cards. And I just ripped one side, and I'm distressing it with the ice spruce, and then I'm adding it to the left side to my background here. I cut away the excess on the bottom, and then I'm using this memory card that matches the paper, and I distress ink that, the edge, and I'm adding foam tape to this one, and then I'm roughing up the edge of my background piece here and attaching this with glue to my card base. And then I'm using one of the die cuts that matches the little bird that's on that memory card, and I'm just adding it with liquid glue to have the whole bird on there. Then I'm attaching my card in the middle, and I'm tucking in some of the border dies I cut them again in this brownish perlmutt cardstock for my stash, and one in gold. And then I have those two butterflies that I want to add, and I am distressing the edge here, give them a little shape, and then I'm adding one of my flowers, and I'm using the sentiment Happy Birthday from the die cut set, and I'm adding this in the middle. And I cut off one of the flowers and adding it to the bottom, and I also add a little bit of this border die, cut it to size, and add this on the top of the other border. And then I'm attaching my butterflies, and I'm attaching my other sentiment on top with foam tape, and I'm using this little egg that comes from the little chipboard stickers, and I'm distressing it so it's not so white around the edge, and I'm adding it right there where the two borders meet. And again, I'm using my gold stickers, my best friend, and adding it all around, and also my glitter drops in Gold Coast. And here is the finished card. Card 5. So for card number 5, I am using a pattern paper, and I also cut out one of the gold mirror, the frame that come in the die set, and I added one of the chipboard pieces on top. Now here on this pattern paper, it's that pink one, I'm adding another stencil, and I don't know where this stencil came from. I'm sorry, I maybe have to figure it out, because I didn't keep my stencil usually with the packaging, so I don't really know anymore where that came from. Then I'm as you can see, I distressed the edge, and now picking up the leftover color with this piece, and since this paper is very thin, it's gonna warp a little bit, but I want this effect actually on this card. Then I'm adding gold splatters, and I'm adding white splatters with my distressed stain in white. And I'm just picking up those big drops. They won't take too long to dry. So then, while this is drying, I'm using this other memory card piece, and I'm distressed the edge with purple. And then I also rough up the edge. And then I'm using this piece, frame piece with my birds, and attach this on top of this memory card with foam tape. But before I do that, I use some gold sewing thread, and I just wrap this around this memory card. And I'm just securing this with some tape on the back, and I just ruffle this up like I wanted to, and then adding my frame on top. And then I decided I want a piece of this collage paper from Tim Holtz to give it an extra vintage look. I'm adding this on top. I'm securing this on the back with some tape. And then I'm roughing up the edge, and this paper, since the paper is so thin, I want this to have like almost looks ripped on the top and on the bottom. So then I'm adding this to my card base. And then I'm adding my centerpiece here. And I have those 2 sentiments. Life is sweet, happy birthday. And then also this dusty edge. And I'm roughing this up a little bit and adding it to the bottom of my card. And then I'm using my Gold Coast and add this to my card as final embellishing. And here is my finished card. Now here is my junk journal that I created, and I didn't film the whole creation of this journal. Instead, I'm going to show you a flip through, and you will see all of the pieces from the kit that I have left over, or almost all the pieces that I have left over. I worked into this little junk journal. I'm just gonna put on some music and then I talk to you when I'm done with the flip through. So I hope you enjoyed this flip through, and hope you got some ideas what you could do with this card kit, and I hope you found this video helpful and you got some inspiration. And here are again all my cards as usually. If you have questions to my cards or to the junk journal, please leave comments below and I will be happy to answer them. And I wish you a wonderful Sunday, and please stay well, and I see you hopefully in my next video. Bye!